First of all, let me speak about that incident that occurred in Minneapolis. As I said yesterday, I think anybody in this country, and certainly any law enforcement officer that thinks that was handled properly, is in the wrong line of work. I think we all condemn the actions that happened there. I think the courts are going to be able to handle the fallout from that particular incident, but it was a devastating incident to watch on TV. I was physically sickened by what I was watching there for the duration of time during that video, and I think everyone I've spoken to in law enforcement from coast to coast shares that same sentiment. We recognize that America has a long and proud history of people peacefully protesting. From the beginning of our country, when it was first formed, through the civil rights era and the actions of Dr. King, we recognize that peaceful protest is something that we do in this country and that we hold sacred and that we support as law enforcement. Not only do we support it here in Green Bay, but we will help facilitate it and ensure that people's First Amendment rights and their rights to peacefully assemble are supported and facilitated and happen here in Green Bay without obstruction. I'll go through a little timeline of what happened, and I'll tell you where we went off the rails a little bit at the end of last night. Yesterday at about 2 o'clock, there were several minor demonstrations over at the city deck where people got together and decided to march through the city of Green Bay peacefully, obeying the laws, not committing any crimes, and having their voices heard. They eventually came here to the police department. Several hundred people were there, stood in front of the police memorial in front, and spoke their minds. Spoke their minds to me, let me know what their thoughts were, what their frustrations were about the anger. And it was a very angry crowd, and it's very understandable. But it was a peaceful crowd, and it was no crime was involved in yesterday's early march. People were able to say what was on their mind, and then they continued their march, and I joined them as we went through the city and streets of Green Bay. Yesterday evening, people continued to march, and the crowd started to build. At about 8 o'clock, there was a group of people that were walking, followed by a group of people in their vehicles. They were generally law-abiding. They were saying what was on their mind. They were peacefully protesting, demonstrating to the community their displeasure at what they saw in the Minneapolis incident and other police-related issues. They were generally law-abiding as well. We had some minor traffic violations. We had a few little scuffles here and there, but there was nothing that was a police concern at that time. At about 10:30 in the area of Main and Baird, our officers received a report of some children or a child that had fallen off a vehicle and was possibly injured. Our officers responded there to try and rescue that individual or provide assistance to them. And at that point, they were subject of having some rocks thrown at our police officers. At about 11:15 last night, at the Marathon Station, which is at Walnut and Monroe, a large crowd gathered. We had called earlier to have them attempt to shut their doors so that no one could enter that gas station, convenience store that's at the corner there. However, the door was open, a large crowd went in there, and they began looting that gas station, the Marathon Station. A few moments later, shots rang out. From the outside, someone was shooting into the building from the outside in the crowd, multiple rounds, and that caused a panic amongst the people that were there. Our officers quickly responded to the sound of that gunfire and set up a perimeter to try and protect the crime scene, to determine that somebody was not injured inside there, but also to protect the crime scene so we could conduct an investigation and hold people accountable for that terribly dangerous act in our community. At this point, the crowd turned on the police officers, and over the course of the next several hours, ultimately threw stones, damaged police vehicles, struck some of our officers with rocks and chunks of brick, broke many windows on police cars there and at other locations throughout the city, and generally caused a great deal of vandalism and harm in our community. Between about 1 o'clock in the morning and about 3 o'clock, small groups of individuals, mostly young people, wandered through the city streets of Green Bay and broke several windows of shops, broke into several other businesses and locations, and committed various acts of vandalism and intimidation of people that were trying to drive through. I want to say this, and then I'll turn it over to Mayor Genrich. We, with a passion, support people's ability to peacefully protest. We will facilitate it. We are in solidarity with people that want to peacefully protest to make our city a better place, and that's what most people out there wanted to do. But when you cross that line, when you cross the line from a peaceful protest to criminal activity, breaking windows, throwing rocks at cars, throwing rocks at officers, intimidating people that are driving by, jumping on other people's cars, then that's criminal activity, and the plan and the process and the policy of the police department is we treat criminal activity by arresting the lawbreakers, putting them in jail, and letting the courts handle the remainder of the case. So let me be clear. Peaceful protest, 100% supportive. Criminal activity, 100% prosecution. Now I'm going to turn it over to Mayor Eric